Julie, thank you very much indeed for joining us on TalkSport. We're hearing lots of noises about bonfires of police perks and bonfires of police allowances and overtime bills of £4 billion. This Winsor Report is going to make a few waves, isn't it?
I think it's going to make an awful lot of waves, yes, and not only for police officers throughout the country, but I think also for the communities, because at the end of the day, Winsor has looked at terms and conditions of pay of police officers. What he hasn't done is look at what police officers should be doing. He hasn't looked at what the frontlining policing should be, and he hasn't asked the communities what they would like to see their police service doing. So we seem to be putting the cart before the horse in terms of we're being told how much our pay is going to be cut by, but we're not being told what jobs we should be doing, and the public haven't been asked by the government what they would like to see the police doing either.
No, sure. I mean, whenever the public are involved, and certainly whenever they ring radio stations like mine, what they generally want is more police out there on the front line, more police out there on the street, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And what's the worrying thing about today is that ICPO have made a statement saying that we're likely to lose around 12,000 police officers over the next 4 years, which would mean, roughly speaking, about 10,200 police constables, which will mean that, you know, the police will be even more remote from our communities.
Right. And as far as the actual cutbacks are going, I mean, we've heard an awful lot in the last few months about cutbacks that are coming to the public sector. These are the first ones that are really kind of cogent that you can look at and say this is something that's actually going to disappear, right?
It is, and we all understand that the country has got a big debt and that, you know, no one is immune from taking their share of the cuts. And as a police service, we absolutely understand that. What our concern is that we're being asked to have a 2-year pay freeze now, and then there are cuts on top of these, which means that in real terms, policing is going to take a bigger hit. The comprehensive spending review last year, a number of government departments put in reasons why their department should be a special case, and we are just astounded that the police, you know, safety and security of our communities hasn't been considered a special case, and that we haven't got away with a pay freeze and nothing more, that, you know, we are going to be suffering even more detriment in terms of pay reward conditions and officer numbers, which will impact on the public.
I mean, would you accept that the way that the police service has been managed over the past decade or so, or possibly longer, has meant that more police officers are not on the streets, in the sense that, you know, the Labour government were constantly telling us that they were recruiting more and more police officers and that there were more police officers than ever in the country, but it seems an awful lot of them were tied up with red tape and tied up with office work, if you like.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting point, actually, because over the years, ICPO, the Association of Chief Police Officers, have been saying, you know, we need more police officers to do this, we need more police officers to do that. They've got them made as accountable to the nth degree. It's important that we have accountability, but not to the degree that we had it. And then suddenly, when the new government has come into power, ICPO are now turning around and saying, you know, we can manage the police service with whatever cuts you need. Clearly, they can't have it always. The people who are suffering are the constables on the front line and the communities who don't know what sort of service they are now supposed to get, you know, from the police.
Right. And would you accept that there does seem to be quite a sort of complicated array of bonus schemes and allowances and overtime payments that are made, so that a police officer's basic salary is augmented in quite a large way, quite often, isn't it? In what I'm told is about maybe 40% of the time.
I think this is a little bit of a myth. It's been very unfortunate. There's been on the news this evening reports that police officers get paid double time for turning up and working on Sundays, which is absolutely nonsense. A Sunday is just an ordinary working day for police constables. We just get paid a flat rate. Our pay is a basic pay. On top of that, police officers will get, of the rank of constable and sergeant, will get paid overtime if they work overtime. At the end of the day, nobody wants to work overtime, but if you're involved in an investigation, if you are gathering evidence and have to stay at work, then clearly you should be remunerated for that. There are clauses within the overtime payments that mean if officers are managed for if there are big expected events that we're going to need to get lots of police officers into, provided police officers are given adequate notice, then they don't get any overtime payments at all. So there's actually quite a lot of myths out there that have been perpetuated and spun by the government in relation to how we are paid to make it appear that it is complicated, when actually the systems are quite straightforward. Yes, there are some bonuses which are competency related to pay to make sure that police officers will stay in particular specialist roles and ranks and will perform. Those payments can be taken from officers if they don't perform properly. But to say that it's complicated, I think is being a little bit unfair, actually.
Okay. Well, maybe it just seems complicated to me, because I don't get any overtime for anything and never have. But there's a figure of £1 million a day being spent on overtime, which is quite a large figure, isn't it?
It is a large figure, but if that's the correct figure, I'll take your word for that. But I think
this is the figure from the Policy Exchange think tank, apparently.
Okay. All right. Yes, with you. I think what you've got to bear in mind is, if there were enough police officers, no one would need to work overtime. And we would all happily come to work, do the hours that we are paid to do, and go home to spend time with our family. The bottom line is that there aren't the police officers to do that. We are detecting lots of crime. Crime detection rates are very high. We have to do the work. We can be ordered to stay on at work. It is not a choice that we make, and therefore we need to be paid and compensated for that.
So do you blame ACPO for this kind of mess that we seem to find ourselves in?
I think ACPO have got to take their fair share of the blame. I think it's disappointing that they didn't make the government and the Home Office aware of the implications of the huge cuts that the police service has been expected to make. To say to any organisation that you've got to cut, slice 20% off your budget is a huge hike to make, and particularly when that is in relation to, people's security and safety. And ACPO have today released figures, or have been leaked, I understand today, saying that this will mean, the loss of 12,000 police officers over the next few years. Well, surely this was information that ACPO should have been making available to the public when the comprehensive spending review was announced, so that people would understand the implications, instead of, it being announced today when Winsor has done his report and it may be too late to redo the sums.
Usually when these kind of figures get bandied about as well, there's a sort of there's always two sides to the story, isn't there? Because 12,000 police officers to go over the next number of years presumably will involve quite a few people who are retiring and who are simply not being replaced, as opposed to people actually being made redundant. What sort of effect will people notice on the street over the next sort of several 6 months or a year?
I think they're going to notice a huge difference on the street. It's important that we have a visible presence so people feel safe at home. That presence is not going to be there. When people are picking up the phone and calling for the police, we are going to have to start looking very carefully in terms of prioritising the incidents that we attend. So someone who would be expecting to get a police officer there may find that they are waiting some considerable time before we can actually attend, and that really isn't good enough.
But that's already happening, really, isn't it?
Well, it's happening now, so it's only going to get worse.
Right. So what do you see as the future then for your organisation? I mean, are you likely to put up a fight about this? Are you going to try and organise some kind of industrial action? What are you going to do?
I think it's very difficult, because this is the other part of the argument. I think that the government has seen the police as a very soft target. They know that we can't take industrial action. They know that we can't go on strike, so they know that our ability to fight back is very limited, unlike other workers in the public sector who can withdraw their labour, who can take industrial action. We can't do that. So all we can do is make sure that the public are aware that if the recommendations in Windsor are passed through, that they understand the implications for policing. At this moment in time, we police with the consent of our communities. The British Bobby is held in high regard the world over, and unfortunately that is something that will just disappear, which is, I think, a huge, huge thing.
Right. And so is there a chance that some of these measures might not be adopted then by the government, or are you sort of rather pessimistic?
At this moment in time, they are recommendations which Tom Winsor has put to the Home Secretary. It's now a matter for her. We have a negotiating board, the Police Negotiation Board, where we can go and we can negotiate on these. So clearly, as a police federation, we will be fighting very hard at the Police Negotiating Board to make common sense prevail, to make sure that people understand the value of the police constable, and to make sure that common sense prevails and not all of the recommendations are passed through. But of course, that's the only place we can actually go and discuss these issues.
Sure. Okay, Julie, well, thank you very much for your time.